Hello, I'm Rafael Seiz Ortiz. I'm going to present a typology of ICT-based resources for language learning. I will present the types of resources based on information and communication technologies and followed by the applications of this typology. The objectives are to develop a classification of digital language learning resources based on pedagogical criteria, and to make this typology available for teachers, learners, etc., in order for them and for us to improve the knowledge and pedagogical possibilities of use of this type of resources. This typology is totally research-driven, and it has two levels. At the first level, it tells us the pedagogical function of the technology. That means the action that is promoted or enabled by the resource in the process of language learning and teaching. We put a T if it's mainly for teachers, or L if it's mainly aimed at learners. The preposition for explains very clearly the functional criteria of this typology. The second level gives us a more detailed information about the technology in terms of its mechanics, results, use, etc. Here is the typology at a glance. We have the T or L of the 15 resources, and the first level in yellow, the name of the type of the resources, and in white we have the subcategories, and all of them we are following a functional criteria. That means the pedagogical function of the technology and the resource. The first type is resources for the development of didactic content, and here it is for teachers to develop new learning materials. Here we have the numbers, as in all the types of the typology, subcategories that gives us more detailed information about the different subtypes in this type. For example, learning apps. The second type is resources for obtaining didactic content. Here the objective is for teachers mainly to get access and download, if we can, learning materials rather than to develop them from scratch. Here we have different possibilities of subcategories, and Encyclopedia Britannica is one example. The assumption in this typology in general, in this type in particular, is that any resource that is written or said in the L2 can be used for teaching and learning languages. The next type is resources for language practice and use. Here learners can practice and improve not only the knowledge about the L2, but also some communicative skills. For example, content-based or language practice, online practice are based on apps. These are the subcategories. A good example would be BBT Learning English. The next type is resources for creativity purposes. They allow users, students mainly, to develop their creative skills, but using the L2, and thereby improving this second or foreign language. Here we have some subcategories, and Canva is a good and popular example of this type. 5, we have resources for communication and collaboration. Here the emphasis is to enable communication in many different ways between the various participants in the language learning and teaching process, and they also promote collaboration and collaborative work and learning. A good example would be Zoom and many other similar platforms. The 6th type is resources for learning management. There are tools, many different resources that allow teachers and learners to administer and manage, organize the language teaching or learning processes and the different tasks involved in the process. Here we have the subcategories. There are many nowadays with new technologies, and Socrative would be one example. The next type is resources for note-taking. And in this case, the emphasis is in collecting, being able to collect information and content from different sources in order to study it, analyze it, interpret, organize it for different purposes. For example, good notes. The 8th type is resources for vocabulary management. Here, the aim is to know, learn, and practice vocabulary. And here we have all kinds of online tools or vocabulary management tools, such as dictionaries and concordances. For example, the free dictionary. The next type is resources for translation management. It is more or less the same philosophy, but in this case, the organization of translation is enabled. For example, translation tools, which are online, etc. For example, phrase or many other similar tools. The next type is resources for teaching professional development. Here it is purely for teachers, and it helps teachers to improve their didactic and teaching skills. Here we have different possible subcategories, and TeacherTube is a good example of that. 11, we have resources for natural language processing in all the actions or the activities that technology, in which technology can help us to process, synthesize, analyze, or simulate natural language, text-to-speech, speech recognition, etc. For example, ChatGPT nowadays. The next one is resources for social and cultural projects. They enable tasks for socializing and for the promotion and acknowledgement and understanding of the second language culture or society. Social networks would be within this type. For example, Goodreads. The next one is resources for ICT-based exploration and basic research. Here, the aim is to improve the knowledge of specific topics through the use of L2 online or through ICTs. For example, WebQuest, which is a specific type of online activity for language learning. The next one is resources for immersive learning. They create virtual environments or immersive environments based on virtual reality, augmented reality, or mixed reality. For example, Second Life. And the last type would be resources for text review purposes. Here, we want to evaluate written text in order to give us feedback, to suggest changes or to improve a certain process, for example, writing. There are grammar checkers such as Grammarly. Regarding the applications of the technology, it is useful for designers because they can consider the different functionalities to integrate in their design, and they establish different functions in the design process. Useful also for language teachers to manage their teaching, to get and create materials, and also to use different learning tools. And for learners as well, to organize their learning process, ensuring variety, and to adapt tasks to their individual preferences. Also, they can help us to establish or develop a library or database of resources based on functional data pedagogical criteria that can be organized or searchable. And also it can be adapted to different formats, databases, software on platforms, etc. So, in conclusion, with this typology, we can benefit from the potential of this type of resources because we know their pedagogical functions. And this typology also enables the knowledge to improve the use of the resources. This information is presented in an online paper which is open to read. Thank you very much.